Okay, I show you another little, very brief clip. It's also the part of the New Year ceremony, and then after the public ritual and also a private ritual, the whole community, whole South people visit each house which has their own Urararuan house, and then eat and drink and sing and dance. And then this is the Gao priest's son. So now he takes charge of this ritual because there's too many houses, 50 Urararuan, right? So they need to drink 50 house feast. So it's too tired for the elders. So the son is taking charge of this. So the priest singing one phrase, and then other South people singing another one. So he is taking a role of this song. So singing a song, traditional song, is Gao priest the job. Did you hear the Tonkalele Luswan? Anyway, he sing New Year.
Handled the camera?
Yeah,
very nice.
Crowded.
Very nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, and do you see the Urararuan in his house?
Yes.
Yeah, this is my brother's house, and then Urararuan, he keep his Urararuan this place, and then no ritual time. They even the owner of the Urararuan, they hardly touch the Urararuan. It's a taboo. You are not supposed to touch casually it because they only shaman can touch them. So the shaman is sitting inside the house. these rituals mean the they are looking for their family's shaman, and then there are 5 shamans in there, and then the other 12 people there. So they take wines of the bowl, and then they are looking for who is my shaman, and then finally they find the shaman, and then the last shaman stand up and then receive the bowl. So she is a shaman of this family, and then now they are banging the walls. It means make the sound like that, and then some ghosts or some evil things just get away like that. And then they got drunk. It's not very well. Because this is kind of the maybe 20th house of this day, so they got tired and drunk. They cannot dance anymore. But it's like that. So we visit house of the Uralaruan. And then just only 3 days, the first 3 days, we need to finish all of the Uralaruan's house. So very busy every day, not doing so much. Okie dokie. So I back to the...
Very good filming. Very informative, yes.
Okay, so the last topic is difficulties in field work. We have some difficulties on your field, like your identity. Like in my case, researching Taiwan as a Japanese is sometimes kind of some trouble or difficulty. I don't know, have you ever seen the movie of Sejek Ballet?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, it was nice. Kind of, it's very interesting movie. So if you watch the movie, you know in the Japanese period, the relationship between the Japanese and then indigenous people kind of complicated. Yeah, maybe complicated emotion. Fortunately, now so many indigenous people are very friendly to Japanese, and then especially like South people. In so many South people, kids of the South people, they marry to Japanese, and then I think that they're kind of proud of that. You know, my daughter married to Japanese, and then now she is living in Japan. They're very happy to tell me they are not. They do not hate me because I am Japanese. It's not that I'm not saying Japanese was ruled Taiwan very well. Of course, so many bad Japanese were doing bad things, but fortunately, after the Japanese, the Kuomintang army came to Taiwan, and they are very bad. So many Taiwanese people, especially indigenous people, think, okay, Japanese are much better than these Kuomintang people. So now Japanese, to their memories, Japanese are good, like that. So, but some like like the Sedek place, also like or Chunyang village, the Sedek people live, and that place maybe some people still remember of that period. So as a Japanese or as your nationality, your identity, sometimes will make some different emotion in the field site. And then the other difficulty is gender issue. Like in Tao family, Tao societies, they are very strict patrilineal society. So I told so many rituals is especially for hunting ritual like that. Definitely the female cannot access the field site. Female cannot touch of the some tools or the ceremonies. It's a taboo. So they're strict. I cannot recall that ritual. So this is a very kind of difficulty. But also, if you are the male researcher, you also have some difficulty in the women's field. Like if you want to do some textile culture, maybe the male researcher cannot touch the tool of the waving equipment. Anyway, so because it is taboo for the male person. So the gender is sometimes make a difficulty in your field work, but for the first 5 years, some family they have some special ritual, and then women cannot attend that ritual. But now the family think, okay, Yo-Yo spent this village so many years, and then okay, we don't see you as a woman, and then now I can attend that ritual. So sometimes if you spend a long time with that in your field work, they give me another permission to you. Okay, so that is mine.
Thank you. Now those questions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Basket is I show you some photos, I think. Okay, this is the contents of the basket. It's clothes, old clothes the ancestors have worn, and then like this. And then also they also keep the accessories. Most of the accessories are necklace. Keep in a basket, and then so many different accessories. So very like this is not accessory. It's like a pipe, right? Yeah. And so many people keep their old clothes in the basket, but this clothes cannot wash or cannot put under the sunlight. So, and then always keep in the basket. They cannot be wet. So, but you can see their traditional textile culture from the clothes in the basket. They completely lost their textile culture. No one can weave anymore, but they still keep this like this. The clothes are almost decayed, but still has. And then before the height.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your presentation, but how old are those textiles?
Someone is like 100 years. Someone is okay. I see some before the ritual. They need to put the things in order. But see because this is they separate the basket. So the basket is new, and they maybe only one or two old clothes, and then the other clothes that they bought a new one. So they only have a new one. Or who is this one? So generally you must have some old clothes, but I think this basket does not have any old clothes. And then I think someone like some Tao family, they do not believe in the ancestral spirits, and because they receive the Taiwanese local religion. So they think that this old basket mean nothing, and then they burn their basket. But after that, the ancestral spirits punished them, and the family or some of family die, or some family gets sick very seriously. Then the shaman advised them to make a new one. Then they are new one. So they do not have any old clothes, all of the new one.
So may I ask then, who is weaving the new clothes?
Oh, there is
They're not weaving.
maybe from the Indonesia or from
No,
it's from the machine. No, they are not weaving. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be the machine, but there's someone making it in their style.
Yeah, of course. They also can buy some attire village or from the Bunun village.
Yeah.
They also still have the textile culture, but it's cost very much, very, very expensive, because now so few people can weave clothes. Just a piece of clothes might be the 8,000 or 10,000 NT. So they don't want to buy such expensive clothes just only to put in the basket, right? You're not wearing your own, just put in basket. So they only buy the machine-made some in Southeast Asia one. Hi.
Is there any competition on who has like the oldest clothes or the most
Yes,
clothes?
yes. That is very interesting. So sometimes during the ritual, some old women or some old South people, I ask them, which is your Urararu one? And then they always said, oh, that dirty one, or that old one. They never say that pretty one, because the oldest is the best. And it's such like a new one, that was very ugly to them, because the old clothes, old basket means their history of their family is very long time, and they are never separate or So the clothes is more clothes is better, and then the dirty old clothes is very respectful. Yeah.
And there are other heirlooms like beads and souvenir type.
Yeah, the accessory is not so. Like the clothes, if you buy a clothes, but you do not buy these clothes, they always buy something looks like indigenous clothes, like this one, looks like Austronesian one. Yeah. So, but accessories is not so restricted. So put any accessories can put in the basket. And then she is the wife of the priest. So the family one is bigger than other one. Means the one actually represents the social status of the family in the village. The bigger, and then clothes is so many, and then clothes are all very old. Means this family is very authentic, and then maybe it's always the eldest son, and then not separate, and then keep the brother one very well, long time. It means that. So they also the pipe, like some shells, the. Samurai is the very center of the Taiwan. They do not have any seaside, so this shell necklace must come from other group, like exchange things. So the Rara one also means the history of the family and also history of the Sao people. Hi.
Have certain rules of how many pens or how many bags to put in the basket?
No. But you cannot put the things casually. They only specific time, like New Year ceremony. You can put new thing in the basket. The other, and then also generally when you're married, the wife can put her own clothes in the basket, means her soul put in this house. So at that time you cannot add anything. But so the things are more and more, right? But because sometimes they are separate, the other brothers, so then you can keep the stuff, some contents.
Question, like most of the time, I don't know, but it feels work like this. From what I read, most of the time, people are appointed, like the president or some other leader wants to know about their past. And they'll go to a professor and say, "We want to know our past," and they're appointed. Like, I don't know, Hitler did something like that, and he sent scientists to Tibet. But if we want to do a field work like this, like, do we have to be appointed? Or do we just randomly go to a village and say, "Well, we want to learn about you"? And they will open up their houses. Like, who is in charge of such a thing? Like, because there must be some kind of body or institution that might help. Like, if we as master students want to do such a thing, how would we do such a field work?
Very good question.
Yeah.
Because I have no friends there. So.
Okay, like my friend, one of my friends, he is researching Bunun people, also in near the Summer Lake, Nantou County. So for the first time he visited the Bunun village, it's because he has a classmate and he is a Bunun, one of the Bunun. So he just go to visit his house, and then he loves this village, and then start to study anthropology. So many of us has some classmates, a friend of friends, in the village. Or another case, if you have some field sites you want to research, but you don't have any friends, you can read some articles in for example, I'm thinking maybe I start to research another field, next field, and then, for example, Vietnam, but I do not have Vietnamese friends, so I read some articles from it's brought by the Japanese or Taiwanese researchers, and then I can contact them, and then should ask him to introduce me to the people, like that. In other way, you go into the village alone. Suddenly, maybe no one will talk to you. Yeah. And you also have the difficulty to find the right person, have a very informative person. Yeah. So the first time might be the very better to have some help from the other. Okay.
So does anyone have an interest in doing ethnology?
It's very interesting.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Do you know, are there a lot of people doing ecology here in Taiwan? Are there a lot of people studying different Aboriginal groups and stuff?
Yes, but now in South Village, I think now I am only one only researcher to do South people currently, but yeah, but in the other village, other groups, generally we have a few researchers each village.
Don't get the people who live in the village, don't they get fed up that always a few researchers come to their village and try to research about them? Are they always so friendly and adopt the researcher and
Oh,
try
well,
to them into the daily life? Or?
well, it depends. It depends. Maybe the personality of the researcher, and then also the, like my sponsor. He is researching Taiwan people, but he also has visited other indigenous village, and then his personality more fit with the Taiwan village. Like Bunun people is very friendly, but they are very easygoing, and then very, like jokes, and then very fun people. But I think it's too casual to my sponsor's personality. My sponsor likes the very Taiwan people has a very strict class society. They have a chief, and then some high social status families, and then the low class families, and then very very strict class society, and then people are kind of the more 严肃 very strict, they are kind of real serious person, and then my sponsor likes that people. So you need to find the people you like. Yeah. And then also some I forgot to say that another difficulty, generally speaking, we are not supposed to have some, relationships with the people we researching. So, some Taiwanese PhD student, he did field work in some indigenous village, and he had a girlfriend of that village, and then after that they broke up, and then the girl's father sued him, and then he cannot do any village this indigenous group because everybody knows that. So he needs to change the field site, and he needs to change whole indigenous group. Yeah, so the relationship is a very, very complicated problem. So do not fall in love with local people. Okay.
Did you ever tell people suspend the rituals, for example, during martial law era? Or they just kept their rituals even during martial law?
Oh, you mean the government?
No, Tao people.
Tao people?
Were they prohibited under martial law?
No, they some like Amis people, they have some from some affection, but Sao people, I don't think they have any serious suspension or prohibition from during that time.
Another question. When did the government introduce the 12-fare system for indigenous people in Taiwan?
12?
No, the subsidy or affirmative action to give some special. Before in Taiwan, people had an ID card with your name and designation of where and what place you came from in China, or what the group you belonged to in Taiwan. And then if you had an indigenous card, ID card, and that was also during the martial law period, probably instituted very early, probably from the 1950s, that you had benefit for being a minority person or indigenous. And also it was a way for the KMT to get support. They had youth centers like Boy Scouts, and for indigenous people they could then get some benefit, although there was a stigma attached to it. They could get their school education at a discount.
So
and things like that.
There were no economic reasons for the
They were considered disadvantaged.
recognition movement.
Yeah, as a disadvantaged people, like the military war veterans, retired veterans. They also have some compensation, and all of that going on. So I know of one family. They are Amis. But they got to be in the 1950s, 40s actually, when Taiwan opened up completely to China. There was a 4-year window between 45 and 49, and there was free trade with China. And all the people who could take advantage of that, like in the forestry area, they could cut lumber and send it to Shanghai. And there was a great market in China. And so some indigenous people became wealthy in that time. But then in the period up through the 60s, they were not that wealthy, and they were losing their wealth and their lands. And there was a lot of exploitation of indigenous people. So in this family, they registered themselves initially as Han Chinese for the privilege of joining the majority population. But as they became less wealthy and had more children, then they started to register their children as indigenous to get special compensation for education. So it was, and then they could prove that. They could say, oh, actually my son is indigenous, even though I claim to be otherwise. You know? So there are all these ways of managing your identity according to compensation, privilege, or in different ways of gaining something from the public service or compensation. But now in Taiwan, for example, there is a national public health and insurance for everyone, all the citizens, and including me. So it's for anyone living in Taiwan, actually. So it's really, I think Taiwan is becoming more egalitarian overall. But still there is some affirmative action for disadvantaged people. So the great question on the priest and the shaman, who can answer the question now? Who got the message?
The message?
Yeah.
Different hats?
Okay, and another?
The clan versus no clans, like shaman no you and don't belong to any clan, versus men are always passed down to the paternal lineage of the clan.
Mhm. And so, if you were to, for example, for your midterm, if there was a question to describe or compare the shaman and the priest.
There's a gender difference.
Pardon?
Different gender.
Yeah,
Shaman
gender.
is woman,
Yeah.
and priest is man.
In
Always.
South case, yes, it
Okay.
is. In South case, it is. Yeah. And then in Taiwan, the most of the shamans are female, but it's not very common in the globally thing. So many societies, the shamans are male, and then some societies the worship the god, they have a goddess, and then shaman is a male, and they are kind of like a couple, or the husband and wife, like that kind of role. Yeah, some societies like that. So the shaman in that society, shaman must be the male.
So essentially in anthropology, the shaman is the voice of the spirit. The shaman is possessed, becomes possessed by the spirit, and then actually is the direct transmission of the spirit to people. And the priest is the interpreter. The priest doesn't go directly to the spirit. The priest interprets the word of the spirit. So, for example, in the Catholic Church, the priest is interpreting the word of God, but actually does not become possessed by God. But the shaman actually becomes possessed by the spirit, and then speaks actually the voice of the spirit. So in a temple, Taoist, there is usually a priest who will interpret someone in the temple who becomes a shaman for a special occasion, to go through a seance, to directly become part of the voice or the entity of the spirit, and will speak in tongues or special communicative mode. Of course, we cannot understand the voice of the spirit directly, of which then the priest steps in and will interpret to the people what the shaman is saying. So usually you need to have the shaman and the priest. And in some cultures, there are no priests, only shaman. And in some societies I've studied in, these are forest people. They all live in the forest, and they believe that each person, each individual, has the power to be a shaman. And they have no designated shaman or priest. And so in that culture, then people will go to the forest, sit under a rock, and then become self-possessed and communicate with spirits or ancestors. Yeah?
I have a question about the Tao. Are any of them Christians?
Oh,
And if so, how do they?
yes, yes. It's an important question. In Taiwanese indigenous society, generally speaking, their Christianity is a very mainstream of them. They accept the conversion to the Christianity from the very early years. But in Tao people, they are a very special case because they are living in the more not a very high mountain area. So before the Japanese came, Tao people already living with Han Taiwanese people. Then they accepted the Han Taiwanese religion, local religion, before the Christianity. So the influence of the Han Taiwanese local religion is much more serious than the Christianity. They only have 4 families in Tao Christianity's family. But because of the Tao people, now so many Tao people marry to Bunun people in the next village, and Bunun people, most of them are Christian. So the Bunun's wife, they are Christian, but because in the Tao religion, that you do not pray to your Raruan by yourself, right? You just give the shaman to pray that. So you are Christian or not, it doesn't matter,
So do the Christians, the Tao Christians, celebrate with the Buddhan Christians, or do they have their own Christian minister?
They have the priest come from the Puri, from the near village, near the township.
And he's Tao?
No. He's Taiwanese.
The concept is very difficult to understand, to be called indigenous, as like North American native people are called Indians or First Nation, but this is such a generalized gloss over people that in Taiwan you have each of these groups, now there are 14, and those are recognized and many others unrecognized groups, and each is very specifically different in having kinship and their belief system and their language, and their way of life, and their aesthetic, their choice of clothing or food. Very, very distinctly different people. And when you just call them indigenous, as a gloss overall, as a people, indigenous people, to me, I really cannot understand this meaning, what it means to be indigenous, because actually there are specific nations of people, minority nations, with their own codes and way of life, worldview. And there is no so-called indigenous at all. It's all different peoples. Very, like Orchid Island people. You go to there, I mean, they're completely different from any other people in Taiwan. And their commonality, of course, that they're all Austronesian speaking family people of one language family. And I think your example of the kinship chart, how one son of a family would like to then start his own kinship branch. And it's very telling of how the Austronesian people, they went to these different islands, and the son of a family would like to start his own separate kinship system. And if he did so on another island across the Pacific, island hopping, then they could be the ancestor of that lineage by starting their own system on their separate island. And in Taiwan, they would simply go to another region to start their own household, which then would become a village. So there are hundreds of villages in Taiwan of that origin, and moving, migrating villages. They didn't just, if these are the Plains people, how did they come to Sunny Lake? And then if the Ataya actually are from of that area of the western side of the Central Range, then how did they get into the Taroko region, the East Coast region? They migrated. And Li Rengui, a linguist, he has a 300-year time map of how indigenous peoples have migrated all over Taiwan. And so when you look at the Japanese 1900 ethnological map of people, it's a snapshot. It's how the people settled by language at that time. But if you had surveyed the people 100 years, 200 years earlier, you would have different regions or different places where they were living in that time. And that has been a trend of migration, coming and going, leaving, abandoning a place, coming back to a place for thousands of years in Taiwan. So there isn't any set region of people. It has been always in flux, and now they are still moving and resettling and going to other places. Now there is an Amish village under a bridge in Sanxiang. And there's a movie in the ethnographic film festival show why these Amish, they lost their land in Taidong and they decided to move closer to Taipei for better education and employment. And they found this river bank, no one there, built their village, and every year they get knocked down by the government. The government comes to tear down their village, and then they just rebuild it. The government built apartment houses for them. They didn't like that. They went back to rebuild their village on the riverbank. And no matter how many times their village gets knocked down, they just rebuild it, because that's the way they want to live. So this group of 700 people, I think what we have observed this evening is how rich their culture is. And as we held, the basket is the perfect metaphor, the piling of heirlooms into the basket. into a basket is a perfect metaphor for the people and their culture. That's what they are living in. They have this basket that is sacred to them, and their knowledge. So one of the reasons for anthropology or ethnology to study is because as we become, I'm not going to say globalized, but we're in a trend worldwide, actually getting to know each other better in a way. But on the other hand, some cultures, there are 6,000 languages in the world, and it is believed in this century at least more than half will be extinct. And this is a very sad epitaph for humanity. This is, I mean, we can go to the moon and put space probes to Jupiter, but we can't on Earth even preserve just some of the languages that are human. Yeah.
But I mean, in this context, I always have a bit of a problem or like a moral concern. Because I remember when we watched that movie about that fisherman that said...
The Navigator.
In The Navigator, exactly, about that father who was a fisherman, and he said, well, as soon as we allow our kids to go and see the world, they don't want to come back and learn how to make or build those ships.
And that's why he made the film.
Yeah, but then at this point I ask myself, is that worth it? You know, is it not? Shouldn't every kid or every person, even belonging to a tribe or belonging to a group or indigenous or not, decide for themselves if they want to do that? I mean, on the one hand, I think it's kind of mean to say you have to because of culture, because of tradition, in order to preserve that for the next 50 years maybe. But on the other hand, I think maybe they just don't know what it means in terms of cultural relevance to the world. But I mean, that's kind of a moral discussion, isn't it?
Okay, so in Taiwan there is a group called Siraya, and they met the Dutch, and the Dutch incidentally transcribed their language and preserved in Leiden in Holland, and now 400 years later, after the people have lost their language, have decided, oh, let's knock on the door at Leiden and get our archives of Siraya back. It has been Romanized, and they can now learn it, and now they employ a Dutch linguist to come back and teach them their language. So it is somewhere.
Yeah.
So the linguist, the anthropologist, the ethnologist is not saying you don't have, to have your culture, like her family children already from the university, they don't know how to say mom and dad in their language. But she is not going to punish them for that, or say, oh, what happened to you? She is learning their language, you see. So the anthropology of a culture is that you try to glean what you can, record it, document it, and maybe these people years later, 100 years later, will say, oh, we have forgotten, how to weave, but an anthropologist came here and learned the weave, and he has done an ethnography, a monograph. It's in a library somewhere. You can open that up and learn to weave again.
Yeah, one of the Taiwan indigenous people, they have the Sakizaya people as might be the 13 indigenous group, and then they were recognized as one of the Amis people before the East Coast area. Yeah. So, but the Sakizaya people now is the smallest group in Taiwan, not South people. So they only have 600 or maybe around that. And then because they are living with Amis people, and they are so small people, and then so they almost completely lost their own culture, and then they got recognition. They got the official recognition of some reason, like a language, yeah. But and then after the recognition, they want to recover some of their ritual, traditional ritual, and they want to recover their traditional clothing. But no one can remember what is the traditional clothing. But fortunately, Japanese anthropologists have a record. But unfortunately, at that time, the pictures are white and black, right? So they cannot know what is the color. They can recover the style of the clothes, but they do not know what is the color. So then they think, okay, we can invent that color. Maybe yellow from the sun, and then maybe the red from the fire or something. And then now the new traditional clothes. Yeah. So I think eventually some language will be lost. So, but my recording, my video can help the kids. maybe 50 years later.
So for studies in Taiwan, we need to visit the Nimpaku in Osaka, the National Museum of Ethnology, and their collection. And another good collection is at National Taiwan University. And then there's the Taiwan Museum. And these are the collections actually where not only are there photographs, but there are remnants, like in the baskets of the people with their heirlooms, remnants. And now in Orchid Island, the people are no longer sailing their ships. They used to sail back to the Batanes. It's about a 100-kilometer sail. And then they found that they could hitch a ride on Dutch or Spanish ships. So they stopped sailing for the past couple of 100 years. And then I asked them, what about your sails? And this guy brought out from under his bed this, it's from the silk of the banana stem, woven sails that were used on their ships when they sailed across the Bashi Channel, kept under a bed for 100 years. So they're still around. I mean, if you ask people and are interested, they would like to show you what they have and adopt you. This is if you show interest and you don't need to be officially designated. Only for your interest to be interested. There's a British person from Oxford, Andy Limon. He went to Orchid Island. First he went to Japan to learn the language. Of course, if you speak to people, you have to go to Japan first. And then he could speak to all the elders. And he stayed on Orchid Island for 2 years. As a young kid, he was like 23 years old. Decided to do all that from England. And helped everyone. He became like the ambassador. If there was any foreigners poking around, they would say, "Andy, strangers are over here. Come, help us." And he would sort things out and help people and go fishing with them, diving with them. And he made documentary films with them. It's a very it's anthropology, or to do ethnology, it becomes it's a commitment to stay with people and to continue research that becomes from your heart with them.